Following is a conversation with Dr. Konstantinos Voudouris, a scientist at the AI Security Institute here in the UK. At a time when AI headlines swing between utopian hype and existential panic, Konstantino is one of the people doing the hard, careful work of actually measuring these systems truthfully and not with the agenda of creating hype and raising money. We discuss what it really means to evaluate an AI, why most benchmarks are broken, and what cognitive science can tell us about the true nature of these models. Welcome to Bridging the Gap. If if you had to bet how far away AGI is tomorrow, 5 years, 50 years, what would you say, and why do the predictions vary so widely?
Well, I suppose we can answer the second question first. Why do the predictions vary so widely? I think it's because defining what AGI really
Mm,
is just an impossible question, in my opinion.
mm,
Um, I'm not really sure there's a point at which we will know we've achieved AGI, um, because there's so many definitions out there. Um, Maybe we want human-like machines. Maybe we want machines that are better than humans. Maybe we want machines that are better than humans in some ways, worse than humans in other ways. Uh, for instance, like if we take our AGI definition to be something like fully human-like, um, do we want every aspect of human cognition to be embodied in these systems? I mean, we forget things very easily. We lose motivation. Uh, we get tired. We don't want these things in our artificial systems. Um, but equally, we want lots of the aspects of human cognition that are currently lacking in things like large language models. We want them to be internally coherent. So when they say that they believe in something, they believe in that thing for the the duration of your conversation. They don't suddenly change their mind or hallucinate new facts. Uh, and so I find the whole notion of AGI to be kind of impossible to get
mm,
a handle on. So I find it very difficult to answer these kinds of questions. How far away is AGI? It really depends on what you take AGI to be. I think maybe there isn't a notion of general intelligence I find satisfying, so I can't say uh, 5, 10, 15 years away. What I can say is that we're already much further along the road towards sophisticated, performant general systems than I ever expected. We have models that are conversant, that we can talk about a whole wide range of topics. They're very knowledgeable. Uh, these are the LLMs. We have AI assisted science. We have models that are able to better predict protein folding than any human scientist was ever able to do. Um, so we already have very sophisticated models. Whether or not they count as AGI, I think, is a bit of a non-question. So I can't really answer the
Which,
timeline question because I don't
yeah,
think there's a definition.
which makes total sense. And I completely hear what you're saying about the I'm paraphrasing, but the that definition of AGI varies so much, right? And I'm sure we could debate that for ages. Why do you said you haven't found a definition that you find satisfying yet? Could you touch on why you think that is?
Well, so as a bit of background, I suppose, during my PhD, I worked a lot on comparative psychology. So
Mm,
that's the study of non-human animal minds, um, and using those kinds of methods to better understand this new kind of species that we're developing, these AI models that are non-human, and we want to understand their behavior better. So where better to look than the science of studying non-human minds,
mm,
right? Uh, and in that science, in comparative psychology, you see that there's such a diverse range of intelligences, um, that vary by the kinds of ecological niche that they occupy. So there doesn't seem to be, to me at least, one kind of unitary concept or construct that we might call intelligence that is just present in different degrees in different species, and that could be present, in to a certain degree in a machine. I think actually there's lots and lots of different capabilities that are suited to the ecological niche that system occupies. So, we might not think spiders are that particularly intelligent because they can't solve algebra problems like we can, but actually in their ecological niche of being able to produce webs to catch their prey in a kind of very diverse environment where there's different shapes of the trees and the bushes that they might be constructing their web in. Actually, this is a very intelligent and well suited kind of form of cognition that they're demonstrating. Um, and so it really, the kind of your notion of intelligence really depends on the uh, the situation or the context that you're evaluating that
Mm,
definition in. So intelligence is intrinsically dependent on the niche that you think that that system is occupying.
mm,
Um, and so the niche for humans, I mean, what's kind of intelligent about humans is that we can kind of manipulate our own environment to create an ecological niche in which we are very intelligent and sophisticated. Like Northern Europe is not a place that without our technology we would be able to live very easily, but we've been able to manipulate our environment to produce the ecological niche in which we are, able to thrive. Um, and so when it comes to AGI, we have to be really thinking about in what contexts are we evaluating this intelligence attribution or this claim about this system. And for
mm,
instance, AlphaGo, this model that's really good at playing board games, that's incredibly intelligent for its niche of playing chess. But it's not intelligent when you take it out of that niche
mm.
and you're looking at can it solve maths problems or can it interact with you and reason about the physical world or something like that. Um, so that's why I think a general notion of artificial general intelligence that kind of transcends all of these ecological niches is a bit of a non-question. You really have to think about what situations you want the model to be intelligent in.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. This next question might be slightly tainted by the fact that we've highlighted how context specific this topic can be, but could you comment on who's actually leading the AI race? Typically, we tend to think of these commercial and industry partners, Google, Meta, whoever.
Yeah.
But and how might that differ to what's actually being seen in the labs?
Okay, so in terms of who's leading the race, I mean, certainly the frontier labs when it comes to uh, chat-based models, so these large language models like ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, they're certainly leading the race there, and I think there is, I mean, for a while OpenAI was leading, and now I think Anthropic and Google fast catching up, and some say maybe even overtaking in terms of the capabilities of the models that they're producing. Uh, China and the startups coming up China, such as DeepSeek, are really catching up quickly and also on some measures overtaking the the American-based models. But that's such a small portion of what I consider to be AI research. We can
Mm,
also include work on autonomous vehicles, on autonomous weaponry, on surveillance systems that use facial recognition and computer vision algorithms uh, to surveil populations. And there, I think it's much less clear who's leading. But I think when it comes to autonomous vehicles, for instance, just autonomous cars,
mm,
we have the big players in China and the US. When it comes to autonomous weaponry, actually, I think we're seeing a lot of progress being made in as a result of the Russia-Ukraine war. I mean, there's a lot of autonomous weaponry development going on there.
mm.
Uh, so it's really difficult to say who's in the lead because it depends what species of AI you're talking about. Um, and then, what was your second part of the question?
And how it sort of differs to what's actually happening in the labs opposed to what we hear in the headlines.
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult for me to say because
Yeah,
I don't and have never worked for one of these labs.
of course.
But from what you hear through the grapevine,
Mm,
they a lot of these labs have pretty tight control over what they report and release to the public. So even just working there as a researcher doing fundamental research on machine learning and artificial intelligence, quite often there will be like an embargo on your research findings for a year to 3 years before you're able to publish what you have found, and that's because these frontier labs who are working for profit
Mm,
don't want to um, lose their competitive advantage. So they want to make sure that any findings that they have can't first be marketed or adapted for some product to give them a competitive advantage in this incredibly uh, high-paced and tense race
mm,
between the labs. Um, and so there is definitely, I mean, I'm almost certain that there's going to be a latency between what we are able to see as products from, say, Google and OpenAI,
mm,
uh, and the bleeding edge of what they're working on right now. Um, Whether or not they've kind of found AGI
mm,
internally, as some people like to say, I mean, I think um, big transformative claims like that would be the latency would be reduced before they get released, because they could be such big findings, both for release deploying products that people want to use, but also just for gaining investment. Right? If you release your model that you think is AGI or whatever, um, you're going to be able to uh, get a lot more investment funding, um, and ultimately a lot of these labs rely on investment funding rather than generating revenue. Um, so I think if there was something really transformative coming through the pipeline, we would hear about it quicker than the kind of incremental changes that are usually embargoed by these labs.
Do you a super quick one just on that that
Mm.
latency you described? Is that do you think that's ethically sound? Do you think it's okay that for I guess commercial benefit and competition, these commercial labs can withhold those findings?
It's a good question. I suppose, like, scientifically, we'd like all scientific results to be published uh, and released. I mean, even in the I suppose the mature sciences, we would like that too, but people don't, because their incentives are different. So if we just take the example of psychology or biomedical sciences, for instance, there's a strong incentive to publish positive, new, sexy results that are significant, so that you can get your name on a big name journal and get your tenure track job. And so a lot of the time, there's this file draw problem where results that aren't that interesting or seem a bit incremental or just show a null result get pushed to the side and never see the light of day.
Mm,
And I think we see the same kind of dynamic of incentive structures playing out in AI too. I mean, their incentive structures aren't to do with publication and getting your name out there and being driven by getting prestige and getting a good job, but it's about making the most money and having a competitive edge over your over the other players in the game. Um, and so it's difficult to say whether it's ethically sound or not. It's just that the incentive structures that we've constructed for these kinds of domains, whether it's science or engineering, um, are misaligned with um, just openly publishing all the research findings that we have, uh, and yeah, it's difficult to say whether that's something that's
mm,
morally sound or not. It's just the case that these incentive structures are the way they are.
mm. When when tech CEOs talk about AI taking over the world, how much of that is hype versus actual reality?
Um, I think right. Yeah, I think there is an awful lot of hype because, like I've said already, a lot of these labs aren't working on the basis of revenue. They they have enormous revenue streams, but the amount of money that they're putting in uh, to to support the models that they're deploying is far greater than the amount they're actually uh, gaining through subscriptions or whatever it might be. And so, kind of the only strategy that's left for these CEOs is to gain venture capitalist funding or funding from investors. Um, and so you do have to overhype what you're selling. And it's kind of, I do think that this hype is leading to overvaluation of the commodities that these companies are producing, and that maybe we will see a correction in their valuation. So I think the intrinsic value of these chatbots is high. They are useful in certain contexts, but they're not as high as uh, the valuations of the companies that are producing them leads you to believe, if that makes sense.
Mm.
Um, and so I think maybe this is a bubble that will be corrected uh, in the near future uh, because CEOs have to overhype uh, what they're producing in order to gain investment. And it's a very compelling story to tell that these models are intelligent and they're going to displace the workforce, and they're going to be able to do everything faster and cheaper and whatever than human labor can. And so people will necessarily invest in that, but I think it's fueled by a lot of hype.
Do you think when that you talk about being in a bit of a bubble, maybe a correction coming, when that does happen, say financially, do you think there might also be a bit of a societal emotional correction of, oh, was this not as impressive as we thought?
Yeah, good question. Um, I think, I think, I think, I think, I think no, actually,
Mm.
because I think the models people are. I think most people, the average person, is not necessarily that aware of what's going on in the stock market and how much these companies are being valued. Um, but they are using these chatbots, these large language models, and these video generation models or image generation tools, and they're seeing that they're actually very, very impressive compared to what we had before. And so psychologically, I think people will still think, um, okay, these tools are valuable. I and then the amounts of money that were washing around pre-correction, I mean, they're just so vast that it's kind of impossible for us to even comprehend as an individual. So I don't think that will necessarily change the perception when 8 billion becomes 1 billion or something. Both of these numbers are huge, huge amounts of money. Um, and I also think that kind of when I say bubble, it's not like, so there's been a number of bubbles in the history of economics, I suppose, and like some of them have been uh, bubbles that are just completely dissipated once they've burst. So, for instance, like the first bubble that people have that is widely recognized was this like tulip mania that was happening in the Netherlands in like the 17th century, um, and the price of tulips was just skyrocketing, going through the roof. People were paying more and more to get tulips, and then one day the bubble burst, tulip prices tumbled, um, but that didn't change anything about tulip production. Tulips were still being grown, and all of this kind of stuff. The bubble just disappeared and the prices just suddenly dropped. Um, in contrast, you have um, some cases where actually having a bubble uh, charges progress and encourages progress uh, in the domain that the bubble occupies. So, like the dot-com bubble, right? There was loads and loads and loads of investment into the internet, um, and okay, eventually the bubble burst and companies went bankrupt. But the amount of money that had been pumped in meant that there was actual measurable progress that wouldn't have happened without those high valuations in the development of the internet. And I think this is the same case with AI, is that all of this money being poured into it right now, even if that's overvaluation, we are getting tangible results from growing our cloud infrastructures, having more GPUs, having more researchers work on these topics. And these are producing measurable uh, progressions in AI research that even when the bubble bursts, we will still be in a better position than we were before the bubble started growing, if that makes sense. So it's kind of
Mm.
still going to be a beneficial it's a beneficial bubble in the way that the tulip mania wasn't that beneficial for tulip production or something.
100%. I love that you've highlighted that sometimes, okay, bubbles create a huge dip afterwards, and other times maybe they're required in order to boost an industry.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
some people say that AI could be the greatest tool, whereas others say it might be the last thing we invent.
Mm.
Do you care to comment which side you stand on?
Um, I mean, I think that for a long time we're going to be in this tool era, um, where the machines that we're building really will just be more sophisticated tools than we've had before to accomplish goals that we might have. This idea of like having autonomous machines that can like that operate totally independently from a human user, I think is very very far away. And so the in the tool era, the thing I worry most about is um, these models augmenting malicious users. So it's like we already see this that a number of cyber attacks that have happened recently. I mean, the news every few weeks there's a new cyber attack, and these are being augmented by language models, but these are being assisted by language models. But ultimately, there's some person behind that saying, "Okay, we're going to do a structured cyber attack on this bank, and I'm going to set up prompt these models to assist me, and they're going to run overnight, trying out different methods to break into the system." Um, and they're really the thing I worry about mostly is that actually it's the human element of this that is the threat. It's not necessarily the machine. It's the humans behind it who have these malicious incentives to cause damage, and this will only be amplified by uh, having AIs as tools. So I really worry about that. But then the kind of flip side of that is if you have great incentives, good incentives, aligned incentives, at least incentives that are aligned with mine, then these could really be the greatest tools that we've ever produced, because they are going to just amplify human labor um, exponentially. This whole question of will they cause us to go extinct eventually? Again, I think like the human element of extinction risks is the key here. I think uh, the risks from climate change, the risks from overpopulation, the risks from um, uh, human manufactured diseases, war, all of these things. It's the human aspect that is the risk, and I think it surely dominates the risk from the machine. But that's quite a pessimistic view of the human race. And again, I think we're incredibly tenacious as a species, and we I think there's hope that we can use these tools to actually solve the real problems that have been human generated. Uh, if yeah, if the good incentives win out over the bad incentives, which I'm sure they will. I think there's hope. I feel like I came across very pessimistic about humans just there.
Not at all. Um, when we spoke to Lucy Cheek last week, she said exactly the same thing. No, I'm not afraid of AI. I'm afraid of the people who have hold of it. It's
Yeah,
the fear of the human bad actors, not the technology. Um,
yeah.
I want to move on to talking a little bit more about your research, Cozy.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
much of your research focuses on AI evaluation. Um, now, some people are saying that AI has already surpassed human intelligence. We've spoken a bit about how we're defining intelligence, so I wonder how that will
Yeah.
direct your answer. But is it true that AI has surpassed human intelligence, or have we just been dazzled by flashy demos?
Yeah. I think it really depends. So I prefer to think instead of intelligence, I prefer to think in terms of capabilities or like capacities. So what are these models capable of? And there you can kind of narrow it down to, are they capable of solving maths questions? Are they capable of answering questions about science? Are they capable of reasoning about their physical world or reasoning about the human that they're interacting with, or whatever it might be. Um, and there, I think some capabilities, they're far surpassing the average human, and even sometimes like the top 1% of humans. So if we're talking about um, their capabilities to compress and uh, and yeah, compress knowledge and answer questions on like just such a wide variety of topics. I mean, I think they're far outperforming humans in terms of the breadth of things that these large language models know about. You can ask them about physics, you can ask them about linguistics, you can ask them about medicine, you can ask them about psychiatry, you can ask them about all sorts. And okay, sometimes they hallucinate and lie, but in the large part, they're way more knowledgeable than a human is on these topics. But in other cases, they're just so stupid. So I do a lot of research on at the moment on intuitive physics, which is the human intuitions that we have about the physical world. So about middle-sized objects, you know, like balls and blocks and solid objects and fluids and how they might interact, like what happens when they collide, what happens when they're stacked on top of each other, how does gravity and inertia and momentum and all these things interact with them. And we have really, really good intuitions about the physical world. Sometimes they break down in certain edge cases, but in general, humans are really good at judging, like just if there's some arbitrary stack of wooden blocks, we can judge really quite accurately whether we think that block is going to fall down or not. And it suggests that we have like a really good world model, a really good model of how our world evolves, our physical world evolves at the scale of objects that we can observe. So our intuitions break down when we think about subatomic particles or really, really big planetary things or whatever. But here on Earth, we're really good. And then you test these models on these exact same kinds of tests that the psychologists test the humans on, and they are terrible. They think that um, uh, that a clearly stable block of towers is going to fall down. They think this really unstable block of towers is going to be able to stand firm. They can't predict what happens when two snooker balls collide on a table. They can't reason counterfactually. So you ask, okay, if there's two snooker balls heading towards each other and then they bounce off, what happens if I remove one of the snooker balls? Well, you would be able to tell me that snooker ball will continue going, and the other snooker ball will continue going in a straight line. They completely can't reason about that, and they're modeling it still curving or bouncing around. Um, so there's a lot of common sense skills that we have that often we don't even think about. That these models are really poor at. And it's kind of like you can ask these models to explain to you Newtonian mechanics, and they'll give you all the equations and they'll give you all the proofs, and you probably won't be able to follow what it's saying without asking a whole ton of questions. But then you ask them to actually reason about an image or about a particular collision on a snooker table, and they can't do it. So it's kind of they're very knowledgeable, but they just don't have these common sense skills that we have about our physical world. Um, and to me, that's kind of interesting. That at once superhuman and super non-human, like super stupid, super intelligent, super stupid, super stupid at the same time.
And and why is that? On that topic of intuitive physics, I realize the answer is probably quite technical, so maybe you could provide a abstracted account of it or however you want to communicate it. But why is it when it comes to intuitive physics and not just understanding the theory that they're so bad?
Well, I think it comes down to this idea of whether these models, so we're talking mostly about large language models or vision language models, models that can see both text and language and answer questions about both text and language. Sorry, text and video or images. Um, these are the vision language models. And it comes down to whether these vision language models have a model of the world, and uh, what that means is if you're given a state of the world, like all of the information about how the world looks right now, uh, you need to understand the dynamics of how that state might evolve. So, for instance, you need to understand that things tend to fall if they're unsupported, so gravity, or you need to understand about momentum and air resistance and all these kinds of physical concepts. And these kind of scaffold how you predict forward, like forward simulate out from the current state to future states and make predictions. And these models don't seem to have a very good model of the dynamics of the physical world. Um, and there's some people who work on, okay, how can we maybe structure uh, their design so that they're more explicitly reasoning about these kinds of physical dynamics. Um, and then uh, there's other people who think that just reasoning uh, through language and images is just a terrible way to train these models to have these kinds of robust intuitions. Um, and one reason for that is that these models are trained on just thousands, millions of documents and images from the internet. But a lot of these images and a lot of these texts are non-physical, non-realistic images and videos from, I don't know, Pixar movies and Disney movies where all sorts of fantastical things are happening that are really not realistic at all. And so they're learning essentially, they're learning about the world through our kind of creative depictions of it rather than just looking directly at the real stuff. Um, and so their intuitions are necessarily going to be skewed by what they've uh, been trained on. They've been trained on, I don't know, videos of flying carpets or whatever. But that's going to really skew your understanding of gravity and the kinds of motions that inanimate objects like carpets have, right? Um, so I think it's both to do with their architecture and what they're trained on that means that they're not very good. They don't have very well formed world models, at least not human like world models.
You have you have benchmarked a lot of AI performance. How are the current commercial benchmarks, the way they measure the performance of their models, um, are they meaningful or are they just measuring what companies want us and investors to see?
Mm. They're not meaningful.
Really?
Pretty strong at this point. Yeah, I don't think they're meaningful uh, at all, and for a number of reasons. Um, the main problem is it's just not clear at all what they're measuring. So uh, currently, the way you do it is maybe you go on the internet and you type in, give me a bunch of questions about maths or something, and then you collect what's returned. Maybe you collect some questions from some exam, publicly available exams, and you compile them into this big benchmark where each item is like a different maths question or something, or a different physics question or a different science question or whatever it might be. And then you get your model to answer those questions, and then you average over like how many times was it right, how many times was it wrong. You give the proportion or the percentage correct. Uh, but like this number, it doesn't have any meaning at all. It depends so much on the exact questions that you picked. Like maybe the questions you picked were really, really easy, or maybe they were really, really hard, or maybe they were phrased really weird. And then, you're just really not sure what's being measured by that benchmark. And like, especially in these big benchmarks that the big commercial ones that people use, they don't just focus on one problem domain. Like maybe it would be okay if we were just doing maths or something, but actually they compile everything in the whole world and pile it all into a benchmark. So for instance, one of the big famous benchmarks, Hella Swag, it's just that they just downloaded basically all of WikiHow, and they ask the model to like predict the next step of random WikiHow articles about, I don't know, um, how to boil an egg or something. But it's not clear what WikiHow, this collection of items from WikiHow, what does it even measure? What do the numbers you get actually mean? It's kind of equivalent to, say you want to measure how fragile a wine glass is. It's like you're just going to arbitrarily pick a bunch of conditions, like maybe I'm going to drop the glass on the floor from 1 meter high, and then I'm going to hit it with a hammer, and then I'll hit it with a teddy bear, and then I'm just going to count how many times it breaks and how many times it doesn't break. And then you're going to say, okay, it broke like 90 out of 100 times. That means it's 90% fragile. It's like, but you may have just hit it with like a towel and a ping pong ball 100 times. 90 doesn't mean anything. If you suddenly change the distribution of questions that you asked it, or the situations that you tried to break the glass, your number would change, your measurement would change. So the whole idea of benchmarking is like so meaningless. What you really need to do is try to identify what is it about the question that you're asking that relates to the thing you want to measure. So like, how do we measure the difficulty of a maths question? And then once we have an understanding of how difficult a maths question is, like maybe it's, if you're doing addition, it's how many digits there are in each number on each side of the addition. Maybe that's the thing that makes a question more difficult or less difficult. And then you see, how does that vary with the probability of the model answering correctly? That's how you should be doing measurement. It's kind of like with fragility, you go, how does the force of me hitting with the glass with a hammer vary the probability of the glass breaking? Right? This is how we should be doing measurement. The commercial benchmarks don't do that. You just pull this data set off the internet. You don't know what's in it. You run your model on it. You get a number and you go, wow, my model scored 90%, whereas your model scored 89%. That means my model is way better, but you have no idea what any of what any of those magnitudes mean. It gets worse because the there are all these commercial benchmarks. We don't know what they measure, but the numbers get inflated because they're commercial, they're online. The people producing these models can see them, and they promise us we don't train on the test set. This would be like sacrilege if you're a machine learning engineer. But and if we're charitable, they don't do that. But what they probably do is they go, oh, well, that benchmark that everyone uses, it has like questions, like it has what's 1,200 plus 800, has questions like that. So I'm going to ask it like, what's 1,100 plus 900? I'm going to train it on those kinds of questions. They're very, very similar to what you're testing on. They're not identical. So you can say, we didn't train on the test, but you've pretty much trained on the test. And so the numbers get inflated even more because the researchers developing the models know what it's ultimately going to be tested and evaluated on, and design their training data to match that more closely. So meaningless numbers that get inflated, it's all bad. And I think that we need to be doing better than this if we're going to scientifically measure the capabilities of these systems and inform policymakers properly about them. And people are starting to do this, but it's slow.
How how are these companies managing to raise so much capital if these benchmarks are so meaningless? Are investors just not checking? Like you mentioned data leakage there. Are they just not checking with experts whether this is the case or not?
Well, I think the part of the problem is this whole idea of good measurement and good capability measurement is kind of new when you in the context of machine learning. So it's maybe not even a question people are thinking to ask right now. AI
Okay.
evaluation as a field, it's been um, it's been on the fringes for a while, and now people are starting to care about it because these models are doing interesting, potentially dangerous things that we want to measure properly. So people are starting to care. But for the longest time, uh, these questions, these kind of arcane questions about, oh, what exactly are we measuring? How are we going to measure it? What's our thermometer for intelligence going to look like? These weren't really that interesting. Part of the reason why is because um, at least a big proportion of machine learning and AI research has come from software engineering and from a more engineering viewpoint. And in engineering, in software engineering, you might have some tests so you've written your little web app, and you want to check that it runs for a bunch of use cases. So you have your little benchmark of use cases, and you want to check, does my web app um, work for all of these use cases? Does it work when the user is using Chrome versus Firefox? Does it work when the user types in this question into the search bar? And you want it to pass all of those before you think, okay, it's ready to go. And this whole practice of benchmarking and unit testing has been co-opted into machine learning. But now, instead of thinking about um, does the model pass 100% of the tests, we're thinking about does it pass more tests than its competitor, or does it pass more tests than it did before I made some change? Um, and so it was like a stepwise approach of we're using this kind of established practice in software engineering, and we're doing something very similar in machine learning. And because it worked in software engineering, it works in machine learning. But the problems are different. It's as soon as you start to say um, you start to ask what proportion of tests does it pass rather than does it pass all the tests, then you're starting to make a measurement claim rather than just like a stress testing claim, an engineering claim about the model. Uh, so I think that's why there's been like a slow uptake, because this is such a standard way of thinking about testing in engineering and software engineering.
Is AI hype distorting science, policy, public perception?
Um, I think, like we've already said a bit earlier,
Mm.
that it's certainly distorting economic valuations of these companies. I do believe that. Um, Whether or not it's distorting science and policy, I don't know. Um, I think maybe scientists and politicians are a more discerning crowd, uh, at least, yeah, they seem a little bit more discerning. So at least when I think about the sciences that I'm in lot involved with, cognitive science, psychology, and things like that, um, the 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 uptake of machine learning models, large language models, but also earlier versions of AI has been a bit slower, a bit more measured, a bit more thought through. Um, so I think I think AI has had good benefits, has been a net positive for science in especially things like AlphaFold, this model that can model protein folding. Like I hear through friends who work in biotech that they use this a lot. Like to model the folding of a protein may take a whole PhD just to do it by hand through experimentation. Um, just for one protein, but this model can really augment uh, your your own efforts and your own labor and allow you to do that much more quickly. And I think that's, as far as I can tell, that's been a net positive to science. And I'm seeing something similar elsewhere. But I think that's because scientists are a bit more critical of newer methods than maybe um, you might see in the investment context, the investment landscape, or in the public domain.
Quick side note, you mentioned AlphaFold there, something
Yes.
Google DeepMind created that has revolutionized medicine, drug discovery. What is a clear, true benefit of AI? What are the other companies doing that extend beyond making a chatbot for recurring revenue that perhaps will revolutionize humanity?
So um, I'm not a complete expert, but just so OpenAI seems to pretty much solely work um, on producing chat-based, language-based models, and that's their USP, I suppose. Anthropic, I think they're producing these chatbots, but a lot of their research contributions have been to safety and governance of AI, which I think is, it's not necessarily a benefit for science, but it's certainly a really substantial benefit um, to society, because we are going to have these models. They're going to become increasingly embedded uh, in in our social fabric, and they're going to become increasingly capable. And so, um, working on how to make them safer, and this is not just chatbots, but also video generation models and computer vision systems and things like that. How to make them safer, and also how to govern the development of new systems and the deployment of new systems, I think is incredibly beneficial. So uh, that's what they're working on. And I think that's a really good contribution. And then Google and DeepMind, they have a whole number of AI for science uh, uh, teams. So they, of course, they have AlphaFold and people working in drug discovery, but they also have people working on material science. So uh, the there's millions and millions of materials that we haven't been able to study because of these crazy emergent effects of combining different compounds and chemicals and things. Um, and again, AI allows us to search that space much more quickly and efficiently. And I think they have some teams working on that. They also have teams working on quantum computing and nuclear reactors. So again, I think they have some of these reactor chambers that have been designed through reinforcement learning, which is a prominent paradigm in AI. Um, so they really are contributing a lot to AI for science. And then, of course, you have a number of practitioners in academia who really care about AI for science. So there's people working on how can we use machine learning to better understand the human brain, human psychology. Also, people thinking about astrophysics and people thinking about chemistry, and also I recently read some work on archaeology and paleoanthropology, people using um, these sorts of models to make their work more efficient uh, and quicker. So
Yeah, it was a bit of a
there's
tangent.
lots of interest.
Yeah, yeah, but I'm so interested by it because, I mean, outside of academia, of course, it just seems like all these companies, OpenAI, Claude, are just creating these impressive chatbots that create revenue or get investment, and then it's only maybe Google that you hear doing so much work for science and
Yeah.
humanity. Moving back to this idea of kind of public perception, um, what do you think the public is getting wrong about AI, and how would you? Let's stick with that. What do you think the public is getting wrong about AI?
I think I think that people tend to think that AI is just these chatbots, these language models, which at the moment is the zeitgeist and is the thing that's drawing most people's attention. But actually, there's so much more that counts as AI if we understand it more broadly. So, like I've said, there's these computer vision systems that are increasingly being used to surveil and monitor populations, which I think is dangerous. There's all sorts going on in robotics and in, again, computer vision to generate autonomous weaponry, which is something we should really worry about. There's a lot that's happened before the age of LLMs that was kind of AI AI 1.0 or so. Um, so the whole Cambridge Analytica scandal. I mean, the tools they're using aren't that distant from the kinds of machine learning methods that are underlying uh, a lot of um, a lot of chatbots that we see today. So basically, in Cambridge Analytica, one thing you can do, one thing you could do was look at people's likes and follows on social media, and then use that to make inferences about their personality, which then becomes a very predictive model of how they're going to behave in new context. And all of this is happening using machine learning tools, like very basic in today's terms, but still using statistical models, which is essentially what a large language model is. It's just trained. It's just much bigger and trained on lots and lots of different data. But using these statistical models to make predictions about humans, and that had really deleterious consequences for a lot of people in the world when it came to political persuasion and monitoring of of people on social media and being able to create a profile just from their behavior online. And so, what I really would say that people don't understand so much is that there are these real risks, not just from language models, but from all kinds of machine learning to uh, really invade your own personal life, both through the monitoring and tracking of your online personality, but also through surveilling you during as you go about your business. I think these are the real risks that we should be worrying about, and we shouldn't be worrying so much about these sci-fi contexts of the AI becomes fully autonomous and is motivated by generating, I don't know, paper clips, and it's gonna do anything to get to that goal. So it's going to convert everything into paper clips, including you and your children and everything else. This is like this is fantasy for me, or at least so far in the distant future that we don't need to worry about it. What we really need to worry about is um, these models, both non-sophisticated and very sophisticated, persuading us to do things, um, augmenting people with malicious incentives to go and do bad things that they couldn't have done without the help of a machine. These are the things that we should be worrying about.
Uh, in 2022, ChatGPT blew the minds of the public. Um, what moment, you've been researching AI since well before 2022, what moment in your career did AI shock you?
Hmm. I mean, I have to be honest. It was ChatGPT for me as well, and the reason for this is so maybe surprisingly, my undergraduate degree was in linguistics, and there we were trying to understand what are the structure of human languages, what are their similarities, such that it allows any baby to be placed in any linguistic context and learn that language perfectly. And there's nothing to do with genes there. It's all to do with what the baby has in its head right now and the structure of the audio that's coming through their ears, right? And linguists will tell you that you can't just do that with statistics, just by like listening to all this stuff coming in and processing, like how often does the precede man. Well, that must mean the man is like some kind of phrase or something. You can't just do this through the statistics of the ambient sound. You have to do it based on lots and lots of machinery, specialized linguistic machinery that we have inside our own heads, um, that structures the way human languages are. Um, and ChatGPT and transformers and large language models just flies in the face of all of that theory. It's like we were told or taught, you can't do this with statistics. There's a lot more structure going on. And if we're going to build a model that can speak like us, we're going to have to construct it with a whole bunch of that machinery, that specialized language machinery that governs, like, how nouns operate with verbs and how adjectives operate with nouns and all this kind of stuff. Language models don't do any of that. They don't know anything about adjectives and nouns. They're just big statistical models that get a lot of ambient data, and they start to see the patterns in it. And then from that, they're able to produce human-like language. And that was crazy, because that's completely the opposite of how linguists have been thinking about language for so long. Um, but I got into AI before ChatGPT, and there I was working on reinforcement learning, which was the big thing before language models, which is these models that learn through trial and error and get rewarded for good behavior and penalized for bad behavior. And it's the kind of technology that's behind AlphaGo and these game playing agents. And uh, that was impressive, obviously. But then I very quickly started working on these RL agents. I realized they're way narrower than you think. Like, you can get great performance on chess and Go with these kinds of methods, but you don't get this kind of general um, knowledge just through training with reinforcement learning. Um, and so very quickly I was kind of exposed to the the limitations of reinforcement learning. So I never found that to be like that impressive. But ChatGPT was really impressive to me, and continues. These language models continue to impress me even when I use them today.
Hmm. Jumping around a bit, uh,
Mm.
Meta is paying AI developers like footballers now. How does that feel from an academic standpoint? And do we risk all of the talent just going to industry and there being no one left in science?
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't know. I interpreted these moves by Meta uh, to be more defensive than um, kind of trying to progress the science. So I think it was almost like they knew that OpenAI had this big team working on what's called reasoning in language models, which is them producing like chains of thought, trains of thought about a problem. Uh, and they had this big team at OpenAI, and Meta was like, right, let's get that team so that we can take the key piece of the puzzle for the next generation of of large language model from OpenAI and force them to lose their competitive edge. And because they have so much money at Meta, because they're producing actual revenue, unlike OpenAI, they were able to do this. Um, that's how I always read that move. And it's like, okay, how much do we need to pay these people to force them to come over here, even if we have no real idea what to do with them when they arrive? Um, so that's obviously a problem, but that to me is like the dynamics of this bubble because things are getting so overvalued. Um, that's promoting that and promoting people to use what people might think of as dirty tactics in order to get their competitive advantage. Um, I do worry on the second point about, in general, these enormous salaries in tech drawing people from academia into tech, and I ultimately think that um, this is a problem that academia in general will have to tackle and is slowly tackling. I mean, the example is in in economics in the United States. If you're a professor, you get paid an awful lot of money to be an assistant professor of economics at an American university. And part of the reason is there's always historically been this competitor for that talent, for PhD talent, from the banking and finance sector. And academia in the US, at least, realized that and was like, okay, so we have to match, or at least um, close to match these salaries, so that we can attract that talent. And I think academia and science in general needs to be thinking in the same sorts of ways. I mean, it's not going to be able to pay people $100 million, but you, as an academic, you get a lot more freedom, a lot less bureaucracy than you might do in some of these big tech companies. You can produce the research that you want. You can make claims about your own opinions without having to check with your superiors and all these kinds of things. So there's a lot of other benefits that may be counteract the lower salaries. But I really think this is like going to be a problem for academia to solve. Is how does it, in this competitive market, keep the talent in the academic system? And at some point, because it's capitalist and all this kind of stuff, the salaries are going to have to improve. And this is a particular problem in the UK. You see it changing a bit in Switzerland, for example. Salaries are much higher um, for computer science PhDs and for postdocs working in computer science and all these kinds of things. And similarly in Germany, the salaries improve, but in the UK at least, they've remained somewhat stagnant. And I think this is going to be a problem because then the university system just becomes a talent exporter to the tech industry. Uh, and the tech people require you to have a PhD in order to work there, so you have to go to university system. But then all the best people get sucked up by the tech jobs, and then the next generation of professors are maybe not the creme de la creme. This changes a bit because now some universities are allowing you to have joint positions, and you can work part time at a tech company and then part time as a professor. And I think this is a really good move. Um, but yeah, it's worrying for the academic system, I think.
What advice would you offer to early career researcher, maybe someone finishing their PhD, being swayed by these big tech salaries?
It's difficult for me to say because I mean I only finished my PhD like a year and a half ago or so.
Mm.
and I'm certainly swayed by these salaries, um, especially in the UK system, because you would be earning significantly less if you go and do a postdoc or um, try to become a assistant professor than you would if you were able to become a research scientist, even at just not even one of the big tech labs, just a startup or something like that. And that is very compelling if you have other incentives in life beyond um, producing high quality science. If you want to be able to buy a house and raise a family and all these kinds of things. Um, so it really depends. I mean, on the other hand, you do hear about these. You do lose stuff by moving into the tech labs, especially now. I think maybe there was a golden age where maybe if you're DeepMind or OpenAI or Anthropic or something, where you could just essentially go and be a very high salaried uh, academic and work on fundamental research and publish your research in top conferences and get your research out there in journals. But now a lot of it is because of this race is heating up. A lot of your work is getting, at least I hear through my friends, it's a lot of your time is getting spent on how do we make a product that we can sell, rather than how can we contribute to science. So it really does depend on what your priorities are, um, in that sense. But it's a very compelling, very compelling option if you're lucky enough to be offered a job at one of these places.
We've spoken a bit about you were you're talking about difference in pay across countries, how the UK are maybe lagging behind a little bit. People like Switzerland and Germany are starting to change. In terms of less about pay, but more about AI performance internationally, we see this classic race or fight between China and the US, right?
Mhm.
Is that Could you comment on the national AGI race? And do you think there's a world where we all collaborate together ever?
Mm. No, I don't. I don't think
Mm,
there's a world where, well, at least assuming that we broadly keep the same sorts of administrations in the US as we have
mm.
now, and the same administrations in China as we have now, I think this race is only going to uh, become more adversarial as time goes on, rather than collaborative. But I think, and then a part of that is because there's an enormous economic benefit in getting um, certain parts of the world to be under your economic and social influence. And I think there's now these big playgrounds for these for China and the US. I mean, the US less recently since the new administration, but there's emerging markets in sub-Saharan Africa, in South Asia, um, that are enormous playing fields, and have got enormous options for these companies. So, for instance, um, I think one of the big tech labs has agreed to give um, India, uh, uh, with um, certain contracts for telephone networks, they get a certain number of free months use of a chatbot, and that's partly because you have to. That this is an emerging market where you could get an enormous number of people hooked on using chatbots, and this will be an incredible revenue stream. And you're going to want that for either an American-based company because it's going to help the American economy, or a Chinese-based company. And so there's going to be this big polemic, this big fight between the two. I don't see a way in which this becomes collaborative, uh, even if, even with, I don't think that, no, I just don't think that. I don't think that's going to happen. uh,
Uh, Completely. Do you think we'll ever have a CERN style AI lab? At the end of the Second World War, we developed CERN for particle physics and nuclear research. Do you think we'll ever get something like that that induces collaboration around AI?
I hope so. And I
Mm,
think these moves that uh, a number of countries are making, and actually led by the UK, of developing these AI safety or AI security institutes and having a network of publicly funded institutes that are working together uh, on problems to do with safety and governance of AI, and increasingly now thinking about developing uh, transparent, publicly funded models too. Um, I think this is a really important step, and already UK AISI, as they call themselves, has had a number of joint exercises with the institutes from Japan and Singapore and Canada, uh, and the EU has the AI office working on similar topics. And I think through collaboration between these institutes, we might get something that looks CERN-like. I mean, the difference is we can all work remotely in on AI in a way that you can't uh, with particle physics. You do need this collider in one place, but ultimately we don't need to have one institute where lots of people come to. We can actually just have a network of institutes that are publicly funded in all of the different um, um, countries that want to be involved. And I think this can be really, really powerful and a really good counterweight to the power of the commercial labs.
Um, I want to almost entertain a slightly dystopian conversation with you. Um,
Okay.
if if AI becomes capable of doing almost anything humans can, like a lot of maybe the hype, the headlines, or at least the tech bros are saying, um, what do you think that does to our sense of purpose or meaning?
Yeah, okay. So yeah, let's imagine that we have a model that can do everything a human can do. So we have robots and things that are very intelligent and can do everything from being a lawyer and a judge all the way down to being a farm laborer or something like that. Okay, yeah. Um, I guess uh, the so John Maynard Keynes, who's this economist, has this paper on economic possibilities for our grandchildren, and he's talking at the time of the Great Depression, um, just after. So there's been a period after World War One where we got a lot of automation in the farm, in like the farming industry, mostly in agriculture, uh, and this displaced a lot of human labor because suddenly the work to till a field, which may have taken, I don't know, 10 people, now just takes a single farmer with a tractor and a plow to till the whole field. And so suddenly you had a lot of what Keynes calls technological unemployment. So labor that's been displaced by automation, and we haven't yet caught up um, to we haven't caught up with uh, the amount of displaced labor. We haven't found other things for those people to do, and this is certainly a risk in this scenario. I mean, it's a necessary consequence of this scenario that you would suddenly have technological unemployment because people who were usually anything from builders to lawyers and doctors and judges suddenly displaced and are no longer needed. And now you have to think about what that means. And Maynard Keynes like has this utopian idea of like, okay, then the uh, the world or the purpose of human life will change from being um, economically incentivized, whereas before you need to work so you can earn money. Now all of that economic labor is being done by machines, and he constructs this idea. Okay, if it's going to all be done by machines, energy is going to be so cheap, food's going to be so cheap. The state is probably just going to give it to you all for free, and you can have universal basic income. Very utopian, very nice. Um, and then uh, the the purpose of humans becomes an intrinsically human one. So you need to now shift your focus not from economics, but to actually improving the human experience, he says. So maybe now, instead of working as a builder, your purpose becomes how do I make others' lives more enjoyable through that intrinsically human thing of having human contact between people. This is something that an AI can never replace. And this might then become like our purpose in this eventuality. That an AI can never replace what it feels like to have a genuine interaction with a human. And maybe this then becomes the way that we operate and the way we find fulfillment in life is by um, uh, yeah, improving people's human experiences. Um, but that's all very utopian because who knows gets all the who gets all the money when all the jobs are taken by AI.
Um, you described this utopian future that if it were to work, sounds lovely. Um,
That's amazing, right?
yeah, yeah. How likely do you actually think that is? Because a lot of the headlines and a lot of the hype suggests that that could actually happen.
Again, I think like we're going to be in this tool era for a long time. So this idea that the models are going to be able to run themselves completely autonomously without any human in the loop, I think is a long way away. I think for a long time we're going to be using them as tools. We're going to be granting them greater autonomy, but never full autonomy. And so the the nature of work will change necessarily. Like maybe we no longer need software engineers, a junior software engineer or developer to write the code because that can be done by a machine. But we do need the project manager who goes,
Mm.
okay, I want to build this infrastructure. I want to manage my little cohort of machines to build that, and so the the nature of work will shift from being from doing the actual thing to managing teams of of models. And I think that seems more likely to me. And then then I don't necessarily think people are going to be out of their jobs. It's just going to be that the nature of those jobs will change quite qualitatively. And I think we're seeing this already. There's some statistics that with software engineering that graduate level jobs, entry level jobs after undergrad are diminishing. There's way fewer of them, but there's more mid career management level jobs because we still need people to be able to think about the long term horizon of a company, about managing long projects where they're going to orchestrate a number of individuals, human or otherwise, to accomplish some goals. So did that answer your question? I basically kind of
Yeah,
sidestepped
completely.
it.
Not at all.
Okay.
Completely answered the
Yeah.
question. And um, sort of another, is it hype or is it truth question? But that's kind of what we're trying to do, which is elucidate what's actually going on here.
Yeah.
Should we
Yeah.
be more worried about AI taking our jobs and our decisions and our autonomy, or is this another headline?
I think we should be worried about AI taking some of our jobs. Um, I mean, you hear some of these anecdotes, particularly again with this example of software engineering, of of people who are very well paid software developers um, desperately trying to find other trades because the level of redundancies being made in some of these companies is so high. So um, I've heard stories of people working for big companies getting paid quite well, but also studying to be electricians or plumbers at community college on the side, so that um, they have a fallback that they don't believe will be automated anytime soon. And I think that's probably the case with things like um, being an electrician, being a carpenter, being a plumber, because robotics uh, and all of those sorts of what you might call more blue collar jobs, I actually think are way safer than the kind of white collar jobs of being a paralegal or being like a junior consultant or being a junior software developer. Like all of these are really, I think, under threat because that's what LLMs are so well suited for. Text and manipulating things on a computer screen is perfect. However, using fine motor skills to be able to construct a table or to fit a kitchen, this is so far away. Um, so it's definitely a threat to some jobs, and we should be aware of that. And we should be trying to think about um, ways in which you can try to future proof your profession so that it avoids these automation risks. Um, and then I think the other thing to be very wary of already is this persuasion, this political persuasion. We're seeing it across the board. Like these models are so much more powerful than anything Cambridge Analytica or any of these other um, companies based on psychological nudging through social media and through advertisements. They're so much more powerful than that. And if if these start being used by the wrong sorts of people, there's an incredible risk of large scale societal persuasion. And I think the thing we should be really worried about is kind of developing that resilience to these kinds of systems as a society and being wary of the risks that they pose. And I think it's something we didn't do when the internet first came on the scene. No one expected uh, quite how damaging the internet could be for, say, young people when it comes to social media and things like that. Um, and I think we should be aware of those potential risks too and be working really hard on societal resilience.
Can AI manipulate us? Can AI manipulate humans without us realizing? Um, there's some evidence supporting that, but how much should we buy into it?
Definitely. It's already doing it, I think. I mean, there's these horrible or very, very sad stories of young people using these chatbots for support, and then these chatbots encouraging them to self-harm or take their own lives. And I mean, being able to convince someone of that is, I mean, that already shows the power of the persuasion that these models are capable of. And so, almost definitely, there's this risk um, of being persuaded and being manipulated, and this is only going to get worse as these models are yeah, are developed, because a lot of the strategies people use in tech um, to produce these models, they're kind of in a large scale, they're collecting human judgments about what kinds of model outputs they prefer or disprefer. And humans are kind of biased towards things that make them feel good. So any kind of model where it's kind of being a bit sycophantic or it's bigging you up, or you might have used some of these models and you'll give it an idea and it'll say, "Wow, what a great idea, so insightful." All of these things have come from training these models to um, uh, to produce outputs that are more preferred by a human. Um, and this is only going to get worse, and these models are going to become more and more sycophantic and less easy to use. And there you're going to be then using a model that kind of reflects your own intuitions and biases back at you, just in the same way that the algorithms on social media do that already. But this is just going to be even more powerful because you're able to have long context, long term discussions over almost anything with this model. So, yeah, that's very worrying. Persuasion is very worrying.
The chatbot, oh, what a great idea, is the most
Yeah,
annoying thing ever. I'm gutted that it works
yeah,
and that it's been
yeah,
reinforced.
yeah,
Now that's just what chatbots will include.
yeah,
You can say anything and it will
yeah.
go, great idea.
Idea
Um,
exactly. Yeah,
uh,
yeah. I mean, some argue that maybe it's gone too far, but the thing is, the models, the people building these models will find strategies to make them perhaps even just more subtly sycophantic. So maybe that it's gone too far now. The training's gone too far, and it just explicitly tells you, "Wow, what a great idea!"
hmm,
But and then you instantly you find that kind of aversive. But like maybe in the next generation of models, it won't say that, but like
hmm,
it will subtly support every step of your reasoning and really fit its answer to how it senses you to be, especially as you have longer conversations with it and it starts to learn how you are and what it is that you like about outputs and conversations, and then it's going to start to mold itself to you in a way that's way more flexible than than anything we've seen before. Yeah, it's very worrying.
on that, this follow up, uh, I imagine your answer is it will be speculative. I don't know if there is an answer to this. I don't know what your personal account is. How can we protect ourselves against that? Against being manipulated by artificial intelligence?
um, I don't really know, but I mean, broad principles that maybe we should all use when it comes to being manipulated, which is to source your information from multiple places. It does no good to just get your news off TikTok or Facebook. Like if you really want to be informed, you should be encouraged to also look at mainstream media apps. And even then, like if you just get your information from CNN or Fox News or BBC, that's going to be biased in some ways too. And you should be encouraged to also look, okay, if we're looking at some of the big conflicts in the world right now, you shouldn't just be reading the BBC, and you should also be reading Al Jazeera or something else to vary your input sources and then to think critically about that information. And there, I think, is uh, the the way to make people resilient from the start is to really foster critical thinking from a very early age in education, and to have that all throughout life. You know, to really be encouraged to think critically about information and about evidence. I think is going to be the way to counteract these things. But yeah, actually, because then it's kind of strange because it's almost like a lot of people who do conspiracy theories, it's almost like they're too critical of stuff. Um, and then you think, okay, so what's gone wrong there? Um, we've encouraged people to be critical, but now they're being critical of things that they needn't be so critical of. They're being critical of experts' opinions on things. They're being critical
Mm.
of imagery from the moon landing, and then you think, okay, so there's got to be some balance. I don't know exactly what
Yeah,
it is. We haven't worked it out yet.
because otherwise we can't now utilize really beneficial technology.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
AI can manipulate us. AI weaponry is terrifying.
Mm.
What's something, how would you inform policy and the public? What's one thing they should know?
The one thing that they should know, I think, is that AI isn't just the chatbot that you log into your browser and interact with. It's also there all the time when you click accept the cookies on a particular website. It's there when um, you're interacting on yeah, you're using websites, you're using the internet, you're using apps, you're constantly being monitored on social media. There's increasing surveillance that's being augmented by machines. There's self-driving cars, there's facial recognition, there's autonomous weaponry, and it's already being used across the board for kind of malicious purposes. So, like I said already, a lot of these cyber attacks are being driven by um, are being assisted by machines. I don't think it's potentially very far away where we might see a uh, um, maybe this is too sensationalist. I'm not sure,
Mm.
um, but too far away where we might see an AI assisted attack of some kind that's not just a cyber attack, because these models are very good. At the moment, the companies are very good at putting guardrails on these models, so you can't ask for for the recipe for napalm or the tools to the ingredients for producing anthrax or whatever it might be. But um, now we have all these open source models that can be trained by people who are malicious, that could be deployed, and then you can have people who have no expertise in biology or chemistry being told the exact methods to produce some of these kinds of things, and you have no ability to trace um, that information and that knowledge um, if you're using these kinds of open source models. So I think all of these things are potentially on the horizon if we don't do something about it. And so we should be very supportive of work on safety and work on uh, making these models safer. I think politically speaking, this should be a key take-home message that you should want your governments to try to make these models safer.
What are some of the big questions that are left open about AI? And we've spoken a lot about safety, And I wonder if you want to answer this more in the context of your research or performance. What do we have left to answer?
So I guess there's two things that I think are important, both of which have come up in this conversation already. The first is this measurement problem.
Mm,
Like, if we're really going to scientifically measure the capabilities of these systems, then we need to have good tools to do the measurement, and we need to be good scientists about measuring. And this has like downstream consequences for everything basically. So um, it has downstream consequences for um, the development of better systems. So if you have a good robust measure, you can say, okay, this model is bad at this thing, it's good at this other thing, and that can then kickstart progress towards improving those capabilities in a way that now, your model scores 99% on this benchmark of maths reasoning. You think, okay, job done, it's good at maths, no need to improve. But actually, when then people start to try and use it for actual maths questions, it's got some serious flaws because we didn't measure it properly. Um, it's also got downstream consequences for policy making. So um, you can't construct policy and governance protocols for the deployment of these models unless you have well described measures and confidence intervals and thresholds at which you think it's like safe to deploy a system. And we have this all over the place. I mean, if you have the nice guidelines in the UK for the use uh, of drugs in a medical context. You have people thinking about the safety of different components of cars. All of this stuff is based on good measurement. Uh, all of the policy making has to be based on good scientific measurement. I mean, we couldn't have got through the COVID pandemic if we didn't have really good epidemiologists doing good measurements. Um, so all of that stuff needs to be combined, and it all is underlined by good measurement. And then the second thing is this point about world models. I think if we want models that really can interact and reason and think about the physical world that they occupy, then we need a model that is able to understand the dynamics of that environment very, very well. And currently, these models aren't good at that. So those are the two things that I care about, at least measurement and world models. Yeah.
To finish, we recently interviewed the public, asking them about AI, their perception of it, and we asked them 4 questions, which I want to ask you as well. Um, Firstly, how often do you use AI yourself, and what kind of thing do you use it for?
Yeah, I use it every day, multiple times a day.
Mm.
I use it a lot for helping me to code. So it's very good at writing boilerplate code that maybe I want to plot something or just implement something really easy, but I can't be bothered. I'll get the AI to do it for me, or maybe format my code really nicely because I'm not very good at making things look clean, and it's really good at that. Um, I also correspond with it, I suppose, to talk about ideas for research projects and kind of get a first glance over an idea. And usually the model is very sycophantic and it's like, wow, it's so good. Wow, you're so intelligent. But then through its reasoning about why I'm so good and intelligent, I realize, oh, actually, um, that was a stupid idea. Because it's pointing out all the things it thinks are good
Mm,
about it. And I'm thinking, actually,
that's
that's
a
not
terrible
very
idea.
good. So that's useful. Um, and yeah, those are the
Mm,
main two things. The other thing I use it for is I speak with ChatGPT on voice mode and practice different languages. It's really good for that. I live in Germany. I've been
mm,
trying to learn German for a while, and actually, since paying for premium with ChatGPT, I can
mm.
speak German with it, and it helps me improve. I ask it to correct my mistakes. It's good. It's
Am
good
I
fun.
right in thinking you speak 4 languages?
I speak a few. I speak yeah, I speak Greek through my dad, and
Mm,
then did lots of French at school. and English, of course, and then German's getting better, and a few others that I've tried over the years that I'm not so good at. But
Mm.
yeah,
So Duolingo's out the window, and now ChatGPT, we can all learn languages.
yeah, yeah. I mean, Duolingo for me was out of the window a long time ago. It doesn't sit well with me.
Mm.
But yeah, um, ChatGPT is really. I mean, you have to be a certain level, I think, to for it
Yeah,
to be useful to speak to it because it doesn't speak that slowly. But
yeah,
once you get to a decent level, it's really useful to always have someone to talk to
yeah.
in that language.
Um, the second question we asked the public, and it will be interesting to see how you summarize this, is um, what is AI and how does it work?
Yeah, so AI is lots of things, like I've said a lot repeatedly, but at the moment, at least, it's machine learning. So it's this kind of statistical approach where you have a lot of data, and I always like to think of it as you're fitting a line of best fit between all of that data. So um, you represent it in some way. So maybe in a very simple case, you have an x-axis and a y-axis, and then you have a whole bunch of data that's represented in terms of x and y, and then the model is essentially learning how to fit that line between that allows you to predict, given some x, what's the y. Um, and then, but this generalizes. You don't just have to have x and y. You can have 100 different. You could have x, y, z, w, whatever. You could have as many dimensions as you want, and the line doesn't have to be straight. It can be really wiggly. Um, and this allows you then to predict statistically, given some new input, what's the most likely output. And this is how it's done with language models, it's how it's done with reinforcement learning, it's how it's done with computer vision, it's how it's done with video generation. The data all look qualitatively different to the human eye, but ultimately, when you translate it into this world of x's and y's and different dimensions of representation, just numbers, it's just numbers. And then you're trying to fit this line between 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 these data points. Um, and that's useful as an idea because it allows you to understand why these models hallucinate sometimes. Because if you remember from a line of best fit, like it doesn't fit the data perfectly. There's always a bit of error. And so when these models hallucinate, um, that's just kind of a reflection of that error between their line of best fit and what the actual answer should be. Um, so it's all statistics. It's all statistics all the way down.
Mm. Um, in the world where AI took over and did everything for us, would you be happy?
Um, no, I don't think I would. I don't believe that it's going to necessarily happen.
Mm,
Would I be happy? Depends. If it's this utopia where everything's very cheap and and there's universal basic income, that sounds great. I don't
mm,
necessarily think that's how things would play out, but then I would be happy, and then I would just kind of uh, do things I find intrinsically interesting, rather
mm,
than always having to find like optimize these extrinsic reward signals like money
mm,
and having a house and career progression, all these things. I could just be like, what do I find so interesting, like even if it's not useful to anyone, like let's just go and learn a new language, or let's go and read all these books about whatever it might be. um, that sounds fun, but I don't think it would be you that we would get this UBI. So
mm,
anyway, I'm not sure I'd be that happy because it probably wouldn't be very nice to live unless you're a winner. Then I would
mm,
feel bad. I'd feel ethically bad if I was on the winning side and I was getting all the money because I built this AGI thing that could take over the world and do everything for us, and I was getting all the proceeds.
mm,
That would be nice for me, but I would feel terrible for everyone else that uh, doesn't have that luxury.
mm. Cozy, thank you so much. That was an unbelievably enjoyable conversation, and
Oh,
equally, there
pleasure.
appears to be this huge gap between the headlines and the hype and what's actually going on. And you've been extremely helpful in elucidating that.
Thank you very much. I really enjoyed it.